Hello everyone, and welcome back to Munro Live. Today, we have an F-150 Lightning. We are going to be tearing this down within Munro, but before we do that, we're going to go through the interior components and try and make some assumptions, thoughts, predictions about what we're actually seeing, and maybe some comparison and analysis to other types of vehicles. I'm Carl Crittenden.
I'm Tyler Schlink.
And I hope you enjoy the video for today. So with the F-150 Lightning, we know that the F-150 is a normal truck. It is what everyone expects when they think of a truck. It is based off of a normal gas engine vehicle. Now, there is a debate. Some people will say, well, if I'm going to design an electric vehicle, why am I not designing specifically for electric? I have the freedom of this type of a design, this type of design. It can be completely new. That is true. And there is a customer that wants something that is completely new. However, this is a very familiar vehicle. This vehicle acts as a bridge, taking the people that are used to having a traditional truck, a traditional gas-powered vehicle, and bringing them into an electric vehicle. So it does serve its purpose and it does have its place. Being an interiors person, I normally always look for luxury first. That's kind of the field that I've been in. It's the products that I've been developing for a long time. Now this is the Platinum version. So this is the high-end version for the F-150. There are going to be differences in this vehicle that will not cascade down to the lower version. Okay. We can accept that, we can understand that, we can move on that. Your vehicle, if you were to purchase one of the lower end, may not match this vehicle. But in luxury, there is a difference between luxury in a luxury sedan and luxury in a utility vehicle, which this is a bridge between luxury and utility. Looking at the top of the IP, this is a hard injection molded panel. So then you have the question, how often are you touching that portion of your IP? Does that need to be a soft, comfortable wrapped component? The soft, comfortable wrapped components are front facing. These would be your closest touch components. Now this is also a truck, so the IP is very, very tall, very, very flat. I'm not sitting back in a sedan with my legs going far underneath the instrument panel. I am much more vertical in this vehicle, and the IP is much more vertical in relation to that. So in looking at the door on a truck, a door is much more square and boxy than anything you would see on a sedan. That is to be expected. So I cannot bring over my assumptions from a high-end luxury vehicle into this vehicle. We have what looks like a wood inlay. Now this would be end grain wood. You can see the splits between the end grain. However, I think that's fake. I don't think it's real wood. We're going to have to look at that when we tear this vehicle apart to understand exactly what they did there for that end grain wood. And that is in the door, and it's also in the center console. The medallion insert in the door here, this is a suede. I am assuming this is real suede. Most of the time in automotive, we don't use real suede. We would use an artificial suede, which people would refer to as Alcantara, even though Alcantara is a brand name. There are multiple companies that make artificial suede, but this is much stiffer. I think this is real leather suede. We will have to determine that. And Tyler actually has a piece of the Alcantara artificial suede. This is much softer. It is a fabric type material made to look like suede.
And this would be off the 2018 Model 3 that we tore down years ago. But very similar application in the door panel, kind of the mid-bolster area as we would call it.
So we have injection molded here down, but yeah, they did split that, but it is one piece. Why is it? And why is the grain different?
Yeah, so this would be a hard molding color, lower carrier panel on the door, but it is interesting. You do see a split line here, and at first I thought it might be two different pieces of plastic put together, but it is just one giant mold. It looks like the reason they put a different grain there, and it might be hard to see in the camera, it's likely due to abrasion and kick in the door. So this is the spot where your shoes, your boots will hit the door the most getting in and out of the vehicle. And I think they wanted to purposefully put, instead of an animal grain, more of like a geometric triangular modern style grain to maybe either to hide the Mars that would happen from your shoes, or to kind of blend in with the natural scratch marks that would happen when a shoe naturally grazes across it. It might just hide those better. It might even be easier to clean, but normally you won't see purposeful differences in grain in there without some sort of purpose. There's no real reason technically that you should change these grains, so it must be more for kick and marring, either to hide it or protect for it. But other than that, it's a very simple door panel, like you said, Carl. Soft touch right where your arm sits, and then it's just utilitarian everywhere else. As nice as it is on the inside, it is still a truck, and it does take a lot of beating, and there's no reason to have vinyl or anything else down here get destroyed during the everyday workings of the vehicle.
So with that breakup, let's look at the breakup for the instrument panel. We know that we have hard injection mold upper. We have these appliques, which are wrapped. We have hard injection molded components that build the rest of the way down the vehicle. Why do I want to mention this? In the past decades, there's been a very traditional way of building an instrument panel that uses a foam in place panel. It will have a big cast skin, a big thick section of foam that is molded right underneath that skin, and this would all be built in one piece. Now I want to do a little aside and show you something that has that construction and explain some of the benefits and some of the detractions from having that type of a style, and why more and more OEMs are breaking up their IP into these different layers. Let's go to the table.
So to that point that Carl just brought up, what we have here is the Model 3 and the Model Y. This one being the Model 3 over here, this one being the Model Y, very, very similar. But this is the cast skin foam in place that he was talking about. Technically, it is soft touch to the feel, all the way up to the windshield edge, but it comes with extra price and extra weight for that. I took the liberty to slice into this a little bit earlier and show you exactly what is underneath this. So as you can see, this cast skin layer is likely going to be like a thermal polyolefin, very elastomer type resin that'll get put into kind of like a slush tool, as they call it. And essentially you're just heating up resin, rolling the tool around, and the outside of the tool, which has a natural grain into it, gets coated in a thin layer of this soft touch plastic essentially, but it has the rubbery feel of a leather or a vinyl. Once that skin is made, they peel it out and they load it into a tool which pulls vacuum on one side, and then they load the injection molded substrate into another side, and there's a gap between the two. And that's where you do a polyurethane foam in place injection to fill in all those gaps and to give you that soft touch. I can push down on this IP, a couple millimeters. And it gives a very premium luxury feel without actually having to wrap it in leather or vinyl. It's a very automated style process. And if you watch the steering yoke video we did, and I talked about the different durometers of polyurethane, you can go as hard as plastic, or you can go as soft as seat foam, or even mattress foam. This gray polyurethane in here is no different than any of that.
So this style has some benefits and it has some problems. One problem, weight. This thing is really, really heavy. Mm-hmm. The other problem is cost. I'm paying $250,000, $300,000 for the injection molding tool. I'm paying $250,000 for the skin tool. I'm paying $250,000 for the foam tool. Bringing all these things together, you can spend an awful lot of money on the tooling. You're getting that at a high price, but I have more design flexibility. If I am trying to thermoform this skin, you will notice that the skin and the substrate do not have to be the same shape. I can hide all of my B-side features and all the ugliness on the substrate, have a nice skin, the foam fills the gap. I can get very, very sharp corners and get thicknesses of material that have finished edge, which I cannot get in any type of a hand wrap. So now let's go back to the Lightning and see that type of condition. I would like to show you this corner. Since this is an actual wrapped component, all of these corners are much more generous radiuses, much more rounded. We cannot fill in gaps as much as we could with that foam and place tool. So all of the other parts around it have to figure out how to fill in this gap. We would call this a rat hole. A condition like this where you have these pieces coming together, it's opening up a big gap. Normally we try to avoid any of those rat holes. So we don't have that design freedom in a hand wrapped component, which we did have in the cast skin version. But it gives us more freedom there as well, because I have all of these individual trim components. I can pop them out and just change these pieces, redesign these pieces, keep everything else the same. So I have some benefit there.
So now that we're further in the vehicle, you can kind of see exactly what Carl was talking about. This is all hard molding color up here, which makes sense. I'm not the world's tallest person, but to waste money and weight on soft touch and material up here is something that automakers have been kind of battling with, you know, the past few decades on how much money and weight do we spend for areas, for high touch areas. Some people would consider this high touch, but you'll see over and over again that what is considered high touch has been moving further and further forward. A perfect example of this is the two best-selling minivans really in the market right now, and that's the Chrysler Pacifica versus the Honda Odyssey. If you look at the Chrysler Pacifica, soft touch basically goes a thermoform skin all the way up across the top, but on the Honda Odyssey, they do a thin strip just like this, and then that thin strip kind of goes a little bit over the cluster, and that's it. So this method of bringing the luxury soft touch far forward as possible and just going hard touch plastic as both a cost and weight savings opportunity is something you're seeing in the industry quite a bit. And you can see they do it here on the new F-150 Lightning. They also did a similar approach on the Ford Mustang Mach-E, all hard touch up here and then like a fabric wrap over top of the speakers in this area. But another interesting thing I wanted to point out in terms of cost cutting, and I don't want to use this term negatively, cost cutting, it's part of it's part of making vehicles affordable. The current vehicle that we're in right now is a $90-some thousand Platinum F-150 Lightning. But not everyone can make that type of financial commitment. They do sell a $40,000 version of this vehicle, which is actually one I'd really like to get my hands on, because that's kind of the one that's not making the news right now. You have the Cybertrucks and the Rivians, and the Hummers, all approaching $100,000, if not much more than $100,000. This vehicle kind of fits in that ballpark. But I'd like to see what the $40,000 version of this vehicle is doing. And so I went on the build and price on Ford's website and took a look at it. And the first thing you notice right away is that this IP looks nothing like this on the $40,000 version. There's the Pro and the XLT trim levels of this vehicle. And what you get is a 12-inch screen in the IP that is the exact same IP that's in all the new F-150s. So they're able to take advantage of that economies of scale of one of the best-selling vehicles in the world, the 2020 and up, really all F-150s for the last couple decades or more. But this is not the IP you get in the $40,000 Pro version or even the $53,000 XLT version. You get the traditional 12-inch screen that's on those vehicles. So when looking and researching that build and price, I noticed that once you get to the Lariat, which is $60-some thousand and above, you actually get a whole new IP. I'm curious to see if they're going to roll out this IP on the internal combustion engine versions of this truck. I'm sure they have a plan to do so. All the mating points should be the same, but essentially when they put this 15.5-inch screen in here, it forced them to essentially redesign everything. On the current F-150s and even the current Ford Expeditions, this is all kind of a soft touch panel right here, isolated. Another soft touch panel over here, isolated. And everything kind of flows into this 12-inch screen. Because they put this 15-inch screen in, which looks identical to the Mach-E, they were forced to essentially redesign all these pieces and rethink that. And because EVs are, you are spending extra money on the batteries and the motors, they definitely decided to no longer do all that soft touch here and kind of just do it right in the corner, just where you can feel, give yourself the luxury feeling, but not overdoing it in terms of cost and weight. And so on the topic of sharing the 15.5-inch screen with the Mustang Mach-E, it's probably been talked about in other videos, but this is one of my first chances to talk about it on Munro Live. I always thought that this external button was, while some people don't like it, some people do like it, some people like all touch buttons, some people like the haptic real feedback buttons. I have always thought the solution was extremely clever. Now, at first glance, people will look at this screen and think that maybe there's a gap or there's a hole in the glass, and this button goes back and actually interacts with a PCB board, but it's just not the case. This button, brilliantly, if you ask me, to solve the problem of having a haptic feedback button but already on an existing screen, it's just like structurally adhesively glued to the screen, and it just has kind of like a capacitive touch material on the back that acts like someone's finger. So if this wasn't here, I could turn the volume up and down just by moving my finger in a counterclockwise and clockwise direction, and that would be how I turn the volume up and down. So whoever programmed the screen essentially just made that circular rotation be the action, but this button is just glued to the screen with a capacitive thing on the back of it, making that motion for you. So I always thought that was clever, and maybe we've talked about it in other Munro Live videos. The F-150's always had this, not always, but since like 2004, had this little cut down. It is a taller truck, so this is nice to be able to kind of see down objects closer to your tires. But another thing it's allowed them to do is move the demister down on the side here. Normally you have a defroster which does the windshield and a demister that does the side windows, and that kind of keeps the fog off of there. Normally you have to put a separate vent up here with little louvers that either snaps into place, and if this was wrapped on a lot of vehicles, it definitely has to be snapped into place. It can't be incorporated into the injection mold design. But because Ford's had this very tall IP and this low window design for well over 10 years now, they're able to put those demisters into the side of this IP, and it's a pretty simple design I've always liked as well. We'll get a shot of that on the camera to put in B-roll. Anything else, Carl, for the IP? We have a non-flocked glove box. I know it is a $90,000 vehicle, and if you buy a Mercedes or a BMW, this would be flocked, but just not the case on many trucks. I know a lot of the items we'll put in here will be abrasive, maybe different tools and stuff like that, and so a velvety flock material might get dirt in it, might get scuffed up a lot easier. So utilitarian makes sense to make this out of mold and color like a majority of the other stuff. The same thing can be said about the center console. Center console, there are competitors in the arena that like to do some soft touch applications on the inside here, flocking or rubber, but you can see they just go hard mold and color. And actually, what's interesting about this one, it doesn't even look like it's got a mold and color grain. It looks like it's just probably a nylon or a polypropylene material, likely glass filled, that this is built in the structure, but it's probably just sandblasted. And when I say sandblasted, I mean like the injection molded tools sandblasted, and has just a slight little roughness to it. But Ford's never really gone out of their way to spend too much money on some of these areas that they know people are just going to throw items in there, and they get scratched up anyway, and they're not a surface. You don't see them a lot. They're not exposed They're only there when you need access to things. So I've always kind of appreciated that minimalistic approach on Ford vehicles.
Let's go ahead and look at these seats. Again, this is the Platinum version. We have a perforation in the center. The perforation is leather. Okay. Bolsters are vinyl. What most vehicles that do have a leather option are doing, vinyl bolsters, leather insert. We know that this seat has a lot of functions. This seat can lay completely back so that a customer can sleep and rest. We know how that works, how it lifts up. So I don't have to take you all the way back. But the shoulders. These shoulders are adjustable. They have 3 different positions that you can adjust to. You lift them out, they'll lock, pull it all the way out, and it goes back. Okay, there's a mechanism in there that provides that. There's a structure in there that provides that. This is cut and sewn and wrapped that does all of that stuff. That's a lot of labor going into all of those different features. So we are going to be tearing this vehicle apart. We're going to see what that mechanism is and how they break up the different materials through this seat in order to enable this mechanism. Let's look at the back panel. From the rear seat, again, I'm a big guy. I have a lot of room. Room is great, wonderful. What's with this back panel? All right, this is a cut and sewn cover. There is no hard back panel. It does have a mat pocket. This is all vinyl. Let's open up that mat pocket and look. All right, this is kind of ugly. A lot of seating vinyls has a pre-applied foam layer. Just gives you a little more cushion while you're sitting on it. They used that seating vinyl for the mat pocket, but that foam is the surface that you were touching. Sometimes automotive companies will put in another layer, or they will use a different vinyl for their mat pocket so you're not interfacing directly to that foam. So here's the question. Personally, I don't like the mat pockets at all. I think that they are a waste. However, if you like that feature, do you have a problem with what the interior of the mat pocket is made of?
Yeah, so I agree with you, Carl. So these, and I've seen a couple of them online, they do look just naturally baggy. Like it's a brand new vehicle, but they look like they're already kind of worn out. I know it's a trend within the industry of the last 10 years or so to actually start going to a mold and color plastic seat back panel, which you can still build in a mat pocket too, but your idea about how often people even use this area anyway. Tesla Model S is a classic example of no mat pockets at all. And there's many people that buy a Model Y or a Model 3 and then buy aftermarket carbon fiber attachments to put on the back that don't have any mat pockets. So it's not uncommon in the industry for people to rethink mat pockets in general. I know the new Chevy Bolt with a B, I believe only puts it on the passenger side, not the driver's side. So the driver's side has no mat pocket. I believe so if you're sitting in the driver's seat, you can actually reach back. Yep. Volkswagen is doing something similar. I believe the Volkswagen Jetta has only put it on one side. But there are vehicles out there considering eliminating at least one, if not both mat pockets. They seem to be kind of like a traditional carryover legacy item that may or may not need to be there anymore. And as you mentioned, the foam backing, also, I noticed on this side, that's just regular do-on material, which is about as cheap as it gets. They usually use this for under seat covering up and strapping around the bottom halves of seat upholstery.
So this is, however, utility, and this is a truck. So all of those utility features are beneficial to the truck. You have the mat pocket, you have the rear cup holders, you have all of the storage in the door. And speaking of utility, let's look at one other feature. I want to get out this side. The rear seat folds up. All right, have this nice, great big open area. What are we using this area for? I want to put the dog's cage in here as we're going away for the weekend because I don't want him to be in the back, but I don't want him running through the car. Okay. I have something bulky that I bought from the store I want to throw in this big area. Okay. But there's more than just this. we have this storage bin that comes up. All right, I have a storage bin and I have seats that can fold down, and I can leave that storage bin there. Now I no longer have that area. So here's my question. Some engineer put an awful lot of thought into designing this bin. It has movable doors, it has hinges on the bottom, hinges on the side, locking features here. It has movable sections here with a molded locking feature. That's a lot of money, that's a lot of thought for this bin. What are we using this bin for? If this was my truck, I know what is in the bin underneath the back seat. This is receiver hitches, this is jumper cables, this is tow straps, this is ratchet straps, or anything that I have into the back of the truck. So that's all this stuff. Okay. So for this vehicle, you can say, oh, but then when I want to fold it flat, I can just move that all the way out. Sure. But if I'm out in the field, if I'm at Home Depot and I decide, oh, I want to lay it flat, guess what? I still have all of the crap that's in this bin. I have my ratchet straps, I have my jumper cables, I have the receiver hitch. Personally, this type of a feature, I think is the customer's either going to use it or they're not, and it's going to be 100% one way or the other. For me, I want the bin because I'm going to have it filled with junk. I'm never going to be able to take all of that junk out, set it aside while I'm not at home, and then fold this down. I would rather this be a fixed removable bin that I can take out, put in my garage, or leave in at all times. Because anytime you add in a mechanism, these hinges, these lock features, you're just introducing something that can break over time. And it makes for a very expensive component that this is the high-end version, so you're paying for that expense. So maybe it's worth it to have it all built in for you, but I would prefer that this feature would be a removable bin. So of course, with the new center console in the F-150, everyone has talked about how these features function. The fact that, oh, my shifter can go down flat. I have a nice shelf. Yes, all of those features exist. So many people have talked about them, so I do not want to talk about them as much. If I was talking about this, it would be the hinge, the mechanism for our slider, which we looked at the mechanism for the Model S when we tore that apart, how that sliding door worked. We are going to tear this apart, so we'll also make mention of how that slider works. We have inlaid injection molded plastic components. Now, I almost would have expected this finish to match the end grain wood finish, which is on the sliding bin, and then also on the doors. It does not. So when we tear these apart, we will look at the construction differences between them. So thank you for watching Munro Live, and pretty soon we are going to be tearing this thing down to every nut and bolt. We'll look at what is inside, how it was made, and hopefully you can be around for the ride. So if you're not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe so that you can see the further videos with the teardown for the F-150 Lightning. Thank you.